In this video I'm going to be showing you my Yellow Power Armour technique. Now in the last video we finished the blue half of this guy, so now I'm going to move on to the yellow half. Now for the base coat we're going to need a warm brown. It doesn't really matter what paint you use. You could use a Steel Legion Daub, you could use a Balor Brown. I'm going to be using a coat to arms paint, a Barbarian Leather. And if anyone's familiar with the old Games Workshop colours, this is Snakebite Leather. Now the only reason I'm really using this is because it's a newer paint and it's not as gunky as the others. So really the first step is to just undercoat the section of the armour with this brown. So yeah, I'm going to be very careful just painting half of this guy like so. So yeah, give me a moment. So with that base coat now done, I can move on to what's known as pre-shading. So this is what we're going to do before we even break open any of the yellows. We're going to get all the shading work done and then apply some very, very thin yellow washes. So first thing we're going to do is mix a little bit of the Snakebite Barbarian Leather, warm brown, whatever you're using, with a little bit of Screaming Skull, bleach bone, whatever you call it. Now for this first mixture we want to be heavier on the brown side, so maybe 2 parts of the brown, 1 part of the ivory, whichever you're using. Now if you're following this on from the blue video, we're going to try and copy the same sort of pattern. So I'm going to leave a brown line in the middle of this shin guard, and everything to the left here will be painted, and then I'll leave this brown line in the middle, and then everything to the right of this will be painted. So just leaving that middle section with the base coat. For the knee pad I'm going to do 2 circles, 1 in the bottom right, 1 in the bottom left, and then copy this missing line all the way up. So leave it in the top section. I'll neaten this all up after camera, but just trying to give you an idea. I'll keep this line moving forward on the boot, just like so, and then paint everything to the left and everything to the right. For the shoulder guard I will curl the brush in, leaving this darker sort of corner, and paint the rest of the guard like so. Same with the other side, and then paint all the middle. And then all the other areas, thinking about sort of like where the light might reflect, so I might want to leave a dark line in the middle of this helmet, just like that, and then again you might want to leave a line in the middle here and paint either side. So yeah, think about where you want that dark part of the shading, and then paint either side of it just like that. So give me a moment, I'm going to finish this stage off. So yeah, as you can see, I've left this darker line in the middle here, in the corners, sort of running sort of across the armour panels here. On the back of the leg, it's quite thick, but nevertheless it's there. The elbow pad, it's darker here and lighter, and then darker here and lighter, sort of reversing that, and then sort of darker in this corner, darker here, and then a strip of darker base coat paint just at the top. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And then what we're going to do is just throw an Agrax Earthsdade wash over it. So not a heavy wash. Really what we want is this to pull in the sort of recesses, you know, these sort of, there we go, these sort of grooves, just give it that little bit more definition. So yeah, do a sort of light coat all over, and then I'll see you in a second. So with the Agrax all dry, it does look a little dirty, but never mind. It's only sort of like a couple of stages in. We're going to repeat the stage before the Agrax Earthsdade. So that was a mixture of the warm brown Barbarian Leather and the ivory. And we're effectively going to do almost exactly what we did on stage 2, but this time just leave a little bit more of the darker colour remaining. So let me just quickly grab this. My Screaming Skull is so gunky now. It's not that old, but I guess I could order some online, but I've been waiting for the lockdown to kind of ease up so I can get back into town. It's just something about going into a Games Workshop, actually walking in rather than ordering things online sometimes. But alright, so there we go. That's, I think, roughly the shade we had beforehand. This doesn't particularly matter at this stage considering what's going to come next. But yeah, so let's focus in. There we go. So we have this dark line running up the middle, and the start of the previous stage is about here. So I want to push it back that little bit further, start the next layer here, and then we're going to paint everything to the right of this. And then similarly for the other side, if that's where the dark line finishes, that's where the next colour is, we're going to pull this about here. So we're painting less and less each time, and it'll be the same for the next stage where I paint even smaller amounts of surface area. So yeah, basically whatever you've painted in the step 2, we're going to come back, revisit it, and paint that little bit less than we had. So I pulled the circle of the shoulder guard down here. Now I'm going to come back a tad and pull it around here. So yeah, just painting less and less each time. As for the elbow pad, if we can see it, as I reverse the colour, it's darker this side and lighter in the middle, so I'm going to start the lighter area here. Paint this bit if you can see. And as it's darker to the left and lighter towards the right on the top, I'm going to paint that so you're kind of, it's opposite. And again, just down here, I'm going to paint this side just like so. So yeah, let me neaten that up, finish the rest of it off, and I'll see you guys in a second. So as we can see, it's obviously getting lighter now, and there's one final stage, I suppose, for the pre-shading, and that's going to be using the Screaming Skull directly out of the pot. So let me add a little bit of water to this, as obviously I've just mentioned that it's getting quite thick now. Just as a general rule of thumb, always water your paints down. Obviously, you know, not too much. You don't want it sort of dripping off the brush. But it's better to have a few thin coats than one really, really thick one. So just like we've been doing before, I'm going to go over those areas that we have just been painting, but this time paint even less, so decrease the surface area. So we're just going to do just this section here. On the shoulder guard, we're going to paint this even smaller. It's almost like a circle now. On the elbow pads, we're just going to paint side and then in the corner. Now, because we're pre-shading, and it's the only sort of armour that I do pre-shade, the yellow actually, you don't have to be too precise at this stage. I wouldn't deliberately try and cut corners, but if you make a small mistake, don't worry about it too much. And the other thing, once we've done this, is we're going to have to edge highlight everything. So a difficult guy with his plasma pistol kind of in the way. We in focus. There we go. So I'm going to edge highlight round the bottom of the shin guard, round this little square section, and then one little sort of tip, I suppose, for edge highlighting is actually to use the edge of the brush. So if I'm, make sure it's in focus again, if I just use the edge of the brush and sort of run it and pull it along the side, it actually edge highlights pretty well, but the edge of the model has to be pretty defined. You couldn't do that sort of like here because you'll just get paint everywhere. But if you've got an area that's pretty well defined, then that can be a little bit easier than trying to use the actual end of the brush. So yeah, just sort of like, if I can get the chainsaw here, show you what I'm doing. So I'm using the flat of the brush and just rubbing it like that. And you can see, without me paying any real attention to what I was doing, you've actually got that line there. So yeah, edge highlighting, go around, highlight all these bits. We want to go around the sort of indents, highlight around these as well if you can, and then highlight around like so. That wasn't in focus, was it? Never mind. So yeah, give me a second, I'll get all that done. So with the pre-shading done, we can now move on to actually applying yellows to this model. But before I do that, I just want to point out that I have thrown in some flashes of ivory in the sort of corners of the shoulder guard there, in the bottom corner of the shin pad. I've picked out sort of highlights on the knee pad and also picked up on the rivets as well. I mean, you can see on the elbow pad how the highlights are reversed. So yeah, that's the pre-shading all done. What we can now do is move on to our first wash of yellow, and we're going to start off with an Averland Sunset, and we're going to thin this down quite heavily to the point that it will barely really notice on the model. And what I'm going to do is thin this down until it almost separates on the plastic. Now if anyone's interested, the sort of a bit of plastic here is actually from Terry's Chocolate Orange, if anyone wants to know. So yeah, this is, I think, pretty where we need it to be. If you're unsure, it's probably safe to start with 1 part paint, 6 parts water, and we're just going to very lightly apply this over the area. Now we don't want it too thick, because if it's too thick, you'll just paint over all that highlighting you've been doing. Now it might mean that you do need quite a few coats of this before it sort of, the pigment sort of builds up and you get it to the shade you want it. So I'm going to apply this first coat of Averland. You can see it's a little bit more yellow in the picture now if the camera focuses. So yeah, apply this wash. You might have to do a few of them. I'll try and keep tabs of how many I'm doing for this, and I will see you in a sec. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like after a single coat has dried. It's still pretty much as we had it beforehand, but it's got a slight tinge of yellow to it now. So yeah, just wanted to sort of give you that sort of insight into what you should expect after just a single coat if you're trying it and you think it's not working. So I'm just going to apply the second coat on now, and again, if I haven't said it already, just make sure you don't apply it too heavily, because then if it is very, very watery like this is, and you apply too much, then it will just pool in some area. So yeah, try and apply it like you would a paint, not a wash. So yeah, give me a second, I'll do this, and then we'll see what it looks like after the second coat has dried, tomorrow evening for me at least. or tomorrow morning, but for you in a couple of seconds time. So yeah, bear with me. With that second Averland Sunset wash dry, the model is starting to take shape now. I think it's got that sort of yellow hue to it, but I want to build on it one last time with a wash of Uriel Yellow. So like we've done on the first step of these washes, I want to apply a 1 part paint, 6 part water sort of mixture. So 1, 2. Right, now what does this feel like? I think it's a little bit heavy, so let's just apply one more for good luck. If you're doing this and it's obviously the first time, or like me, you don't do it that often, it's better to be too thin, because then you can always go back and apply another coat, than if it's too thick, then you kind of ruin all the work you've done. So I think this is good. It's about 8 parts paint, but maybe I didn't have a full brush full of paint. So yeah, that's pretty good. So this will just bring up the hue a notch, and yeah, so leave it with me. I'll coat this. Remember though that if you're applying this, don't do it too heavily, because then it will just sort of pull into the recess. Now because we're applying a very, very light wash, it is going to go into those little grooves and lighten them up, but I think it's just a byproduct of the technique, and I've struggled with painting yellows really, and this one I think it's a good sort of 9 out of 10, so I'm willing to accept the sort of drawback of these recesses being bright yellow, but if you're so inclined, you could go back and try and dip a little bit of Agrax Earthsdade into it again, just to darken it down again. So yeah, there we are. Give me a second and I'll move on to the next step. So with that dry, it's finally yellow, and I'm pretty happy with the hue so far. The next stage, we're going to have to add some final highlights, and I'm going to start off with a Dorn Yellow. Now I can take this directly from the pot, and what we're going to try and do is some very, very fine edge highlighting. So around the bottom of the shin guard here, if we can kind of edge highlight around the areas that were the final shade of bleach bone, and then pull it up along here. So you notice I'm kind of stopping here because I can see where the bleach bone ended, or screaming skull, sorry. And I'll pull this up here as well. Just like so. Again, I'm going to go around the bottom of this, pulling it up to about here. So go around and just pick out those extra details where you see them. So these little vents, I'll kind of highlight these. I might apply a sort of flash of colour towards the top here. And then things like the elbow pad, just going to highlight around this side, pull it into the centre, and then on the lighter side I'm going to pull in as well, just like that. So you go around, highlight all the areas that were, the screaming skull layer, as I said, and then once that's dry, what I'll end up doing is take the white and highlight the extreme edges of some of these areas. So I know this is going to be still slightly wet, but nevertheless I'm going to apply just sort of a dab of white in the far corners, just there. That's all it really needs. You just need to apply a small amount of white in the absolute sort of edges of the highlight. So give me a second and I'll finish the rest of this off. So there we go, highlight's all done, and he's almost there. Next step is to apply a Lamenters yellow wash. Now I appreciate this is discontinued paint now, and unfortunately I don't know the replacement, but a yellow wash should do the trick. Now at the time, Games Workshop did two types of washes. There was two yellows rather. One of them is a little bit more on the orange side. This one is far more on the yellow side of the yellow washes, but hopefully you get what I'm rabbiting on about. Not much to it. We're just going to apply this over the top. Hopefully it will sort of bring the highlights and the sort of base layers we've done so far into one. I'll sort of shade them together so you can see there that sort of Dorn yellow, the hue of it was changed slightly. So yeah, pretty simple. Just apply this over, again not too thick because then it's just going to pool somewhere. And it's you can see the difference between this and the shoulder guard. In fact, actually, if we do half of the shoulder guard, my camera any good? Kind of. You can see how it's changed it slightly. So yeah, give me a second, and I'll. It's only really one last stage. There we are. That's the yellow technique. Now, if you're happy with that, just leave it as it is. I, for one, always apply a gloss varnish over the top of my Marines. I assume that any sort of paintwork like that would have some sort of top coat, a lacquer applied. The paint style lends itself to be very, very shiny anyway, and it does help when you're handling the models that you don't sort of wear the paint away if you keep picking them up in the same area. So yeah, entirely optional. You might not want to do that. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like, leave any comments below. And until next time, guys, take it easy.